Hello and welcome to the channel. In this video I'm going to talk about a new masking feature that Adobe added to Lightroom Classic. And it's a little misleading actually. So it's called the Landscape Mask. It's actually a series of masks. And while it does help a lot with landscape photography, it also does help a lot with things like urban and street photography and things like that as well. So I thought we would take some time and just kind of go through the features and how this works. It is really quite interesting how it goes about providing the different masks and that are available to you based upon the content in the photo. So let's take a look. So the landscape mask shows up right at the top of the list when we open up the masking tool. And unlike the other masks, well, actually probably similar to the people mask, when you select it, it actually goes through and looks for which different types of masks can be created and applied within the photo itself. So in here it found sky, architecture, vegetation, and artificial ground. There's also water, natural ground, as a couple of other options. And as you hover over them, you'll see that it selects or shows you the overlay rather for the different masks that would be created. And one of the things that you've probably discovered watching a lot of these kind of videos, especially for a new feature that comes out, is the examples that are typically shown usually work perfectly with the new tool, and then you go to use it and there are things that are a bit off. Doesn't quite get it. And we can definitely see that with the sky mask. We can see, if I just select this just to keep that up there, we can definitely see it. It's selected part of the building here, maybe a little bit there too. Can't really tell. But the rest of it seemed to be pretty good. The others, it did seem to do a pretty good job. It's interesting that it did select this, but it did miss down here. And I think it got almost all of the streetlights except for these. And when you get down there, it skipped most of those, but picked up most of those down there. Don't know how important that actually would be if we're going to go and do some adjustments to those buildings anyway. So I don't think I'm too worried about that, but you could definitely see that there's a little bit of an issue there. So let's go ahead and let's start by working on the sky. And this is the same sky selection tool if I had just selected sky initially. But I'm going to go ahead and start there and tell it to create the mask. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and say subtract, since it did seem to do a good job of picking up the architecture. Come down, say select landscape and select architecture and tell it to create the mask. And that looks much better. So I've got that nice and clean. It looks like it did a pretty nice job. I don't see anything else in terms of the sky. And yeah, this does look a little bit whiter, so I think maybe part of that was selected too. So I can now come in and make my adjustments. So I think just knock it down just a little bit. There was a storm coming in this night, so I want to definitely make that look as stormy as possible. Maybe drop the shadows just a little bit and the highlights, but then bring up the whites, something I like to do with skies. And I think that's probably pretty good from that perspective. Maybe make it a little bit warmer. Go way too far, obviously, but maybe just a little bit. So somewhere like right in there. And maybe just add just a touch of magenta. So do that, and then a little bit of dehaze, a little bit goes so far with this. And so that's working with the sky. Now I can go and pick the other ones. And so I'm thinking maybe I want to knock a little bit of these buildings down a little bit. So let's go ahead and create a new mask. And this time I'm going to select landscape and architecture. And when I do that, I see I've got that one spot, but since I'm knocking it down, I'm just going to leave that alone because I'm not really too worried about that. It's already black. I don't need to really make it any blacker. So that seemed to do a pretty nice job with that. It did pick up part of this car right here, so I'll just clean that up quickly. And same thing with that stop sign. So I'll tell it to go ahead and create the mask. Let's do a subtract. It's going to use a brush. And it's going to turn auto mask off because everything that I'm working on is pretty localized, so I don't have to worry about bleeding over, I don't think. And I think that's good. So I think I'm going to do here is just knock the highlights down a bit. Just to kind of give it's a little bit more of that storm coming in. Just kind of balance it off more with what that sky looks like. And maybe even bring the contrast down some. There, I think that's pretty good. So I've got, really quickly, all of the buildings, and that actually would have been a little bit of a nightmare to work with previously. I probably would have selected the sky and then did a duplicate and invert mask to get everything else, and then probably would have done something to select the road, not worried so much about the cars and that along the side. But I think having this ability really did help. So now let's look at this road and see what we can do there. So if I come and say, select landscape and pick artificial ground, and there is a little bit of a trick you could do to make the ground look wet. So let's go ahead and do that, and that's to take the contrast and move it all the way over to 100, and then come down to clarity and take that all the way down to minus 100. Now it gives it a little bit of that wet look, which kind of matches nicely with the sky. Now maybe that's a little bit too warm, so I think maybe, you don't often hear me saying that, but I think maybe just cool it up slightly. So now it looks like we have a wet road to go with that sky. It actually makes it match better than what I actually saw when I was there, at least at this point in time. About 10 minutes after this photo was taken, it did open up, and it was pretty nasty. I'm not going to do anything with the vegetation, but just to kind of show you again what that looks like. Select landscape. If I were to say vegetation, it would pick those trees and the plants that are in the planters and all of that, and I could bring those up, knock those down. I'm actually okay with the way they are in here, so I think that looks pretty good. So I'll just go ahead and cancel that. And that is part of the capabilities that landscape brings you. Now let's take a look at another image, and this one has water, it's got a building, it's definitely got a lot of vegetation, it's got some people in a canoe, and they're coming across, and it's a little bit of a shaky horizon there as well. So let's go and first, let's get this cleaned up a little bit, and I think that's probably pretty good at this point. So we'll come into our mask tool and go to landscape, and now notice it has natural ground, water, vegetation, architecture, and sky. And notice with vegetation, it actually picked part of the building, and it missed a little bit of the shoreline, although maybe that was dirt. And then water it did a good job of. Natural ground, it seemed to do a pretty good job of as well. But you could see that there's definitely some things that it did struggle with, especially when it came to vegetation. And I think actually architecture, I think it did a pretty decent job on that. So let's first start with the vegetation, because I think that to me still looks a little bit off. Now notice that these are all check marks, so I could actually have it create 2 separate masks for those. So let's go ahead and actually let's just have it, just to make things quicker, let's just have it do all of them. Let's go ahead and say create masks. And now I've got ground, water, vegetation. And I can go and adjust these as needed. So I'm going to say for vegetation, because it looks like it did grab that, I'm going to go ahead and tell it to subtract. Go to landscape, say natural ground, and tell it to go ahead. So now I've got just that area, and it still has some things down here that aren't quite right. Actually, I think that might be part of a tree, so that's probably okay. But definitely not this area here or inside the building. So go take a brush tool and clean that up. And I guess when you think about it, with this being really a 1.0 release, I guess it's not surprising that there are some issues like that. I think right here too, that looks a little off to me as well. So have that, and now I can go and play with maybe you do want to bring that up a little bit just to kind of match the grass. Add a little bit of contrast in there. Drop the highlights. Drop down the shadows a bit. And that to me looks a little bit more natural. Next thing I want to do is come down to the water. And with the water, I don't have to do much. I think I'm going to just bring up the shadows just a little bit and maybe bring up the exposure just a touch, especially with that background being so bright with the sun hitting it. And go with that. I don't think I'll do anything with the sky. Well, maybe I'll just knock it down just slightly and bring the highlights down, bring the whites up. I think somewhere in there. I think that looks pretty good. And then natural ground, and I think I'm just going to just knock down the color temperature just a bit. So there you have it, the new landscape masking tool that's part of Lightroom. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. As I mentioned, the landscape tool does make things a lot easier when it comes to making those last fine-tuning adjustments to your photo. If you liked the video, please give it a like. If you'd like to be notified when I post future videos, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and that little bell, and you'll get an email or something whenever I post something new. Thanks. Bye.